Hello and welcome everybody back to another weekly predictions episode. It is NFL Week 2. And before we get started in the predictions, I would like to say go follow me on Twitter at Alex Weister. I'll be talking about sports, whatever I'm watching at the time. It's a fun time over there. Go on and check it out. I would also like to say if you like the video, then like the video. And if you like my content that you watch, make sure that you drop a subscribe. Alrighty, now let's get into the predictions. Let's go over the predictions that Kevin had last week, see his record, the most and least surprising wins and losses in his picks of the week. First off, overall, his record was 7-9 last week, so he was just a bit under 500, but of course he has a chance to make it up this week. The most surprising loss and win of the week, most surprising loss was the Packers versus Saints. I mean, he picked against my Saints, so I mean he had it coming. But nonetheless, the Packers losing to the Saints 38-3 it's just insane. I mean, nobody could have predicted the Saints would have done this coming into this week. I mean, injuries, uncertainties on who's playing. Nobody really knew how Jameis Winston was going to play. So I mean, it was just a very big surprise that they were able to beat the Packers like that. Now, the most surprising win was the Chargers versus Washington, where he picked the Los Angeles Chargers. Most surprising win because of the fact that Washington's defense was absolutely stout, and to see that the Chargers were able to win that game so handily, I mean, that was just a surprise to me as it was a surprise to Kevin. Least surprising, was the Browns versus Chiefs. Of course, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, as long as the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, they are going to be insane. No doubt about that. So them beating the Browns is not a surprise to me, and I know it's not that much of a surprise to Kevin. And the least surprising win was Seahawks versus Colts. September Russell Wilson and the Seahawks are pretty much like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in September. Absolutely insane. And of course, the Colts being marred by injuries. Carson Wentz probably not 100% in this game. Of course, not having his best offensive lineman. So it's not much of a surprise to see that they were not able to beat this Seahawks team. So I think Kevin did well going into the first week because, of course, week 1, we don't really know how teams are playing yet this season. So 7-9 in week 1, I think that's pretty good. Now, let us get started with the picks for this week. Alrighty, Kevin, let's see what you got. Starting off, he has Washington versus the New York Giants. I think that is fair. Washington, they had a hard-fought game against the Chargers last week, but their defense was still phenomenal, and this Giants team is going to struggle against that defense. And of course, I mean, their defense themselves is not that great, so I think Washington, without Ryan Fitzpatrick, should be able to beat this Giants team in pretty handily, and I believe Kevin has a score prediction for this. Okay. He has Washington winning by 7, which is fair. I mean, Washington's offense never really scores as much as you would think. So 7 is a pretty fair margin for them to win by. Let's look at the next game he has. The New Orleans Saints. I see you learned from last week, Kevin, and decided to actually pick my team for once. Alrighty, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. He has the Saints beating the Panthers. I mean, that's pretty fair. Panthers did get a win last week, but it was against a Jets team that is a little bit shaky right now, to say the least. And of course, the Saints had that dominant performance against the Packers. They will be missing a few key players, such as Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Davenport. That may make a difference in the game, as the Panthers' offense should be able to move the ball a little bit easier against the Saints. But I still think, and Kevin still thinks, that the Saints should be able to win this game. Let's look at the next one. The Cincinnati Bengals beating the Chicago Bears. I think that's fair as well. The Bengals had a very, very good game against the Vikings last week. A game that went into OT and nearly almost ended up in a tie, but the Bengals were able to get that game-winning kick. Shout out to them. A fantastic game. I'm glad to see Joe Burrow is back and healthy. And of course, Jamar Chase proving those doubters wrong who's saying he's just going to drop all of his passes. They did pretty well. Shout out to the Bengals. And I agree, Kevin, with them winning this week. Of course, Chicago, they did not look great against the Rams, but having an offense look good against that Rams defense is very, very difficult. But I will say, overall, the Bears didn't look that great. Defensively, Matt Stafford was able to have a fantastic game against them. So I think it's definitely fair to say that the Bengals are going to be able to win this game and probably win it by a decent amount if Joe Burrow and that offense can keep it going. Let's look at the next game. The Cleveland Browns beating the Houston Texans. Now, the Houston Texans may be 1-0, but they beat a Jaguars team whose head coach is Urban Meyer, and they have a rookie at quarterback who did not look that great. I don't think the Texans are going to be able to upset the Cleveland Browns. I mean, the Cleveland Browns almost beat the Chiefs last week. Don't get me wrong, they are still a very good team. Baker Mayfield played great throughout the entire game until that final drive where he threw that interception. The Browns are still a very formidable team. So I do not think the Texans are going to have a good time against this team, and I agree with Kevin with the Browns winning this one. The LA Rams beating the Indianapolis Colts. Once again, a very fair pick. I mean, Matt Stafford had a great game. The Rams' defense, of course, is phenomenal, so that defense is going to have another great game against Carson Wentz and that injured team. So I think the Rams beating the Colts is another very fair pick. The Buffalo Bills beating the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins had a great game against the Patriots this week. They were able to hold them off and get a win. Great team win. I did not see how Tua played, but they were able to get a win against a pretty good Patriots defense there. So that's pretty impressive to say nonetheless for that Miami offense. Now the Bills, on the other hand, they are coming off of a very, very tough loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they are going to have to fix a lot of things if they're going to make a deep playoff run like everybody's expecting them to this year. But I think this Dolphins team isn't going to cause too many problems for the Bills and that Bills offense. I think the Bills can get this win, and so does Kevin. The New England Patriots beating the New York Jets. This is another pretty easy pick to make. The Patriots looked good in their loss to the Dolphins, but the Jets, on the other hand, they didn't look good in their loss. It was the Sam Darnold revenge game, but of course, he didn't play too bad in that game. But of course, Mr. Christian McCaffrey is the heart and soul of that offense, just like Alvin Kamara is for the Saints. I think the Patriots win that game, and they win it pretty handily as well. The San Francisco 49ers beating the Philadelphia Eagles. That is an upset. That is an upset, I believe. The Philadelphia Eagles, they played very, very, very well last week. They look like they could be a team that could win that NFC East. Making a run in the playoffs, that might be a little much right now, but beating a 49ers team that looked good against the Lions last week, despite the game being close and the Lions storming back in the end, they did look good. But I would have to say this is Kevin's upset of the week, and that's a very surprising pick, Kevin, having the Niners beat the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles looked good last week, Kevin. I don't know if you want to be picking against them. The Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Raiders. The Raiders are coming off of a stunning win over the Baltimore Ravens, which Kevin's not too happy about as he is a Ravens fan. He just wants to see the team that they beat or lost to lose, which is fair. I understand how you feel, Kevin. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers coming with that insane win against the Buffalo Bills, I could see them winning a few really, really big games this year if they can keep playing like that. Now, the key word is if they can keep playing like that. If their offense decides to drop down to the level a lot of people think that they're going to with Big Ben regressing, then I could easily see them losing a game like this or just completely falling apart throughout the rest of the season. So that's to be seen, but I could see the Raiders winning this game and winning it pretty easily. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Denver Broncos. Of course, as I said earlier, the Jags did not look great last week, but it was Trevor Lawrence's first game. So it's definitely a little too early to call him a bust at this point. He still has a lot of time to work on his skills and get better. I think the Broncos are a good team to bounce back against, despite them having a great game against the Giants where they were able to get a pretty handy win. I think the Jags can bounce back this week, and so does Kevin. I think worrying about Trevor Lawrence too much that's a little too much. I think he'll be okay. I mean, with Urban Meyer, though, that's a different story. I don't know if that team with Urban Meyer can really go anywhere. Next up, he has the Arizona Cardinals beating the Minnesota Vikings. Another pretty easy pick in my opinion, as the Cardinals had a insane game. Of course, Chandler Jones with 5 sacks against the Titans. They had a dominant performance, and then the Vikings, of course, sputtering out of the game against the Bengals. I think that's a pretty easy choice to make. The Cardinals' offense and defense both look good, and there wasn't too much to really note about the Vikings that looked too good. Kirk Cousins looked okay, but otherwise that team was not that impressive against that Bengals team. Next up, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons. Once again, another easy pick. Buccaneers, they got away with a close one against the Cowboys on Thursday night. So there is some questions about them, but this Atlanta Falcons team getting absolutely blown out by the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think it's going to be much of a challenge for the Bucs. I think it's a pretty easy win, and I think Kevin thinks it's a pretty easy win, and that is also Kevin's lock of the week, which is fair. I mean, the Bucs being the defending Super Bowl champions, coming off of a win, and Atlanta coming off of that huge loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. I could see that being a lock of the week. The Dallas Cowboys beating the LA Chargers. Now that's an interesting pick. While the Cowboys did lose on Thursday night, there was a lot of things that they did do well. For the Chargers, on the other hand, of course, Justin Herbert has been playing phenomenal. That team is going to be formidable. Rashawn Slater was insane. He was just an insane blocker for Justin Herbert. He played, 50-something snaps and didn't allow even a pressure. He's going to be a stud for them on that offensive line, and he's going to keep Justin Herbert clean in that pocket. And that's looking good for them in the future. The Cowboys winning it, though, with the amount of injuries they got, I don't know if I can agree with you, Kevin. I'm going to have to go with the Chargers on this one. But you picking the Cowboys, that's fair, as they did do a lot of things right in that game against the Buccaneers. The Seattle Seahawks beating the Tennessee Titans. This is a game that should be a lot closer than it looks, but the Titans did not look good last week. They didn't look good at all. And that Seahawks team with September Russell Wilson is just going to be rolling through teams throughout this entire month. So I can agree with the Seahawks winning this game, and I could honestly see them winning it by a pretty big amount if Tennessee comes out like they did last week against the Cardinals. So I think that's a pretty good pick there, Kevin. And the Chiefs, I see. The Chiefs made you pay last week for picking against them, so you decided to pick them this week against your Baltimore Ravens in his game of the week. I think that's going to be a fantastic game. Picking the Chiefs to win against the Baltimore Ravens, I think that's a pretty easy pick to make. The Ravens looked suspect against the Raiders. It was scary how many issues they had. Now, of course, you can point to them not having the running backs that they had coming into the season, but I don't think that's something that you can really point as their main issue. There was a lot of things they did wrong, for one. So I think the Chiefs winning this game and winning it handily on Sunday night is a pretty fair assumption. And I think Kevin has a score prediction for us. Okay. He has the Chiefs winning by 17 points. I think that's a pretty fair pick, Kevin. The Chiefs' offense, of course, they stormed back against the Browns last week, putting up a large amount of points in a win against the Ravens. I think that's pretty fair. And our final game of the week, the Green Bay Packers beating the Detroit Lions. Now, the Packers came out and did not look good offensively and defensively against the New Orleans Saints. So it is some cause for concern for them. Hopefully they can pick it up coming into this week. It should be an easy win for the Packers, in my opinion. It seems like Kevin has the same assumption that I do. I mean, that Detroit Lions team, nobody's really expecting anything from them throughout the entire year. I mean, they brought a good game to the 49ers, but they ended up losing in the end anyway. I think that the Packers could take this game pretty handily, and it seems like Kevin agrees with me. That is all of the picks that we have. I think you did good this week, Kevin. You're under 500 right now, so, of course, we will check back at the end of next week's games, or this week's games, and we will see how he is, if he's above 500. I'm praying for you, buddy. I'm praying for you, because some people are praying on your downfall. I'm not. I'm hoping that you can succeed and end the season with a good amount under your belt. I'm predicting that you go over 500 this season, Kevin. I'm really rooting for you. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.